Next, we come to the predictors. Each predictor will either be integer, decimal, or categorical. Choose here whether you want to include it or exclude it as a predictor in the model, i.e. will it be predictive of the response. If you want to select or deselect everything at once, you can click this checkbox here to save some time. When you have lots and lots of predictors, it can take a couple of seconds to register. If it's numeric, you can automatically apply a transform, such as this, but we won't. Now, categorical variables are either in or out. We can group levels later in the modeling process if warranted, or you can group in Excel prior to uploading the file. Numerical values, either integer or decimal, need to be banded. For example, an age band might be 25 to 30. The banding is mainly for presentational purposes, so it can display actual versus fitted for each band during the modeling process. We will see later that you can fit numerical predictors as continuous factors or treat the bands as categorical if desired. To get you up and running as quickly as possible, Preddle will create equally spaced bands for each predictor. Preddle just needs to have 3 pieces of information to do this: the lower bound and upper bounds within which to slice the bands, and the number of bands within it. For example, though not in this data set, for age the values might range from 17 to 89. The lower bound you set might be 15, and the upper bound might be 90, giving a range of 75. 75 being 90 minus 15. And the number of bands within this range might be 25, so that there are 25 bands which are 15 to 20, 20 to 25, all the way up to 85 to 90. Now, for each predictor variable, Preddle has helped pre-populate these by looking at the range of values in the actual data, rounded these and put this in the lower bound and upper bound boxes, and found a sensible numBands value too. But you can override the pre-populated values here. Once we save the workspace, Preddle will cut each predictor into evenly spaced bands between the lower bound and upper bound that we specify. If need be, Preddle creates an additional catch-all band for values above the upper bound and another catch-all for values below the lower bound. These catch-all bands, if required, will not be part of the numBands value here that you specified. In the age example, if you overrode the lower bound with value of 15 with say 20, then any records with ages 17, 18 or 19 would fall into an additional band that would be created called less than 20. Once we pick some values here and save the workspace, we can look at the distribution and then come back and change the bands if need be. Having said that, try to minimize the need to come back and forth, particularly once modeling has started, since whenever you press save up here, you destroy any models that were built off these settings. Once you start modeling, you shouldn't need to repress save on this page unless you want to change one of these values shown here, which you shouldn't have if you invest the time up front to get the workspace settings and the predictor bands correct. Now, you want to be selective with the predictor variables you include. Don't put any in that you know for sure you won't use. You won't use case ID, because that's just a unique key. You won't use any of the weights as predictors, since these weight each record but won't predict the outcome. Similarly, you won't include the response variables as predictors, since you can't use the response to predict the response. So you want to exclude these. By this I mean you can use things like income and employment status to predict if someone has a gambling problem, but you can't use whether they have a gambling problem to predict if they have a gambling problem. in reality, if you knew the answer for someone, you wouldn't need a statistical model to predict it. We get rid of these gambling problem predictors as well as the variables that were summed up to give the gambling problem values, such as past year gambling factor in job loss. You would exclude that, say. In practice, at this point, you'd want to include any variables that might be useful predictors. Selecting a variable here allows us to try it in the model. It doesn't require it to be in the model. Normally we'd exclude case ID, which we did at the beginning, since that's just a record identifier, and exclude the response variables and exclude the weight variables. For the purpose of this tutorial, however, we'll trim it down further because there's just so many, and I want to illustrate the concepts rather than spend time building the world's best gambling addiction model. So I'm actually going to, first of all, exclude everything, and then only include certain predictors. So we'll include gambling, we'll include highest grade attended, we'll include importance of faith, we will include how many times moved, include effects of legal gambling, include not gambled past year, include why not moral or ethical, include region, include race grouped, include age grouped, include marital status, include recoded household income, and include largest amount lost range. As I said, in practice, you probably want to throw everything you can into the model and find out through testing these predictors what you want to keep in and what you want to exclude, rather than excluding stuff up front. But for the purpose of illustrating how Preddle works, I just want to include just a few variables to keep it manageable. Now, if you have uploaded several files, you can switch between them using this drop-down. Be sure to save any changes before you switch datasets, or else your settings changes will be lost. So save the settings now, and you can see the progress bars moving along, saving those variables that we selected.